Welcome, dear listeners, to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight we invite you to drift into peaceful slumber as we journey back through the mists of time, to an age when gods walked the earth, when the sky itself was a battlefield, and when the fate of humanity hung in the balance between cosmic powers beyond comprehension. Close your eyes, settle into comfort, and let the ancient story of the Anunnaki Wars carry you gently into restful sleep. The stars above us have witnessed countless ages. They have seen empires rise and crumble into dust. They have watched as mountains formed and oceans receded. And long before recorded history, before the first civilizations laid their foundation stones, these same stars looked down upon a conflict that would shape the destiny of our world. This is the story of the Anunnaki, the ancient gods of Mesopotamia, and the wars that echoed across heaven and earth. Let your breathing slow now. Let your muscles relax. As you listen, allow yourself to float backward through time, through millennia of human history, past the Great Pyramids, past the first cities, back to a time when the world was young and the gods were very much alive in the consciousness of humanity. The story begins not on Earth, but in the heavens. According to ancient Sumerian texts written in cuneiform on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, there existed a planet called Nibiru. This distant world followed an elliptical orbit that brought it into our solar system once every 3,600 years. And on this planet lived the Anunnaki, beings of immense power, knowledge and longevity. Their name means those who from heaven to earth came, and come they did, descending from the skies in vehicles that ancient peoples could only describe as divine chariots. Picture, if you will, the ancient sky, not the light-polluted heavens we see today, but a canopy of brilliant stars stretching from horizon to horizon, unpolluted by the glow of cities. Imagine primitive humans, living in small communities, looking upward in wonder and seeing something descend from those stars. Something bright, something impossible, something divine. The Anunnaki came to Earth approximately 450,000 years ago, according to the translations of Sumerian texts by scholars. They came seeking gold, not for wealth or adornment, but for a far more critical purpose. Their planet's atmosphere was deteriorating, and they had discovered that fine particles of gold, suspended in the upper atmosphere, could help repair the damage and preserve their world. And so they looked to Earth, rich in minerals, abundant in the precious metal they so desperately needed. Let yourself sink deeper now. Feel the weight of your body against the surface beneath you. Each breath carries you further into relaxation, further into the story, further toward peaceful sleep. The first Anunnaki to arrive on Earth were led by Enki, the brilliant scientist and engineer, god, of wisdom and water. Enki was among the eldest sons of Anu, the supreme ruler of Nibiru, king of the Anunnaki gods. Enki established a base of operations in the region we now call the Persian Gulf, in a place they named Eridu, the first city. And from Eridu the mining operations began. But mining gold from the earth was brutal work, even for beings as advanced as the Anunnaki. Deep in the mines of southeastern Africa, in the Abzu as they called it, the lesser Anunnaki workers toiled endlessly, extracting the gold that would be refined and eventually transported back to Nibiru. For thousands of years, perhaps as many as 100,000 years, this work continued. And gradually the workers grew weary. The tablets speak of a time of great discontent. The Anunnaki workers, called the Igigi, those who laboured in the mines and fields, grew tired of their endless toil. They had come to Earth as volunteers, as workers for the good of their civilization, but the work had gone on for so long that many had been born on Earth who had never seen their homeworld. Generation after generation of Anunnaki had known only labour, only the darkness of the deep mines, only the exhaustion of endless work. Your eyelids are growing heavy now. The story continues, but you need not strain to follow every word. Let it wash over you like gentle waves upon a shore. Let the ancient narrative carry you toward rest. The Igigi finally rebelled. According to the texts, they set fire to their tools. They marched from the mines to the dwelling place of Enlil, who was Enki's half-brother and the commander of Earth operations. Enlil was the opposite of Enki in many ways. Where Enki was creative and compassionate, Enlil was strict and authoritarian. Where Enki sought solutions through wisdom, Enlil demanded obedience through power. The two brothers had a complicated relationship, one that would eventually lead to devastating conflict. When the rebellious workers surrounded Enlil's residence, demanding an end to their suffering, Enlil was furious. He viewed their rebellion as treason, as an unforgivable offence against the order and hierarchy of Anunnaki society. He called for their punishment, for their leaders to be executed as an example. But Enki, ever the problem solver, proposed a different solution. Why not create a worker race? Why not fashion a primitive being native to Earth and elevate it to the point where it could perform the labour the Anunnaki found so burdensome? And so, in an act that would reverberate through all of human history, the Anunnaki created humanity. Using genetic material from themselves and from the primitive hominids that already existed on Earth, they fashioned a hybrid being. The Sumerian texts call this being the Adamu, the first man. Created in the image of the gods, yes, but created for a specific purpose: to serve. Let your mind drift now through these ancient laboratories, these places where the boundaries between god and mortal were first crossed. See Enki and his half-sister Ninmah, goddess of childbirth and medicine, working together to bring forth this new creation. The texts speak of many attempts, many failures, before success was finally achieved. Beings with malformed limbs, beings who could not speak, beings who could not reproduce. Trial after trial, until finally they succeeded in creating a worker who could follow instructions, who could breed true, who could labour in the fields and mines. At first, these early humans were sterile, unable to reproduce on their own. They had to be created in batches in what the texts call creation chambers, but eventually Enki modified the design, giving humanity the ability to reproduce naturally. This decision would later become a point of serious contention between the brothers. Enlil was furious when he discovered that the primitive workers could now breed without restriction. He saw the danger immediately. These creatures, made in the image of the Anunnaki, given a spark of divine intelligence, could multiply beyond control. They could become a problem, a threat, or at the very least, an unmanageable population that would disrupt the careful order Enlil tried to maintain on Earth. But Enki saw things differently. He had become fond of his creation. He watched humans learn and grow. He saw their curiosity, their resilience, their capacity for both love and ingenuity. Enki began to teach select humans, to give them knowledge that was meant to remain the exclusive property of the gods. He taught them agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, writing. He shared with them secrets of medicine and architecture, and in doing so he planted the seeds of civilization itself. Your breathing is slow and steady now, deep and regular. The story continues in the background of your consciousness, a gentle current carrying you toward the shores of sleep. Thousands of years passed on Earth, though for the long-lived Anunnaki it seemed a shorter time. Their cities grew in Mesopotamia, in the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, Eridu, Nippur, Lhasa, Sippar, Uruk, Kish. Each city was given to one of the great Anunnaki as a domain to rule, and humanity spread, multiplying across the earth, serving their gods, building the ziggurats and temples that would endure into historical times. But tensions were building in the world of the gods. The relationship between Enki and Enlil had never been simple. They were both sons of Anu, but by different mothers, and in Anunnaki society this made Enlil the heir, despite Enki being older. Enki had been first to Earth, first to establish the settlement at Eridu, first to begin the mining operations. But when Enlil arrived, he assumed command by right of succession. This created a fundamental rivalry that coloured everything that followed. The two brothers represented different philosophies, different approaches to the question of what the Anunnaki should be on Earth. Enki saw possibility and partnership. He looked at humanity and saw potential, saw beings worthy of elevation and education. Enlil saw order and hierarchy. He looked at humanity and saw tools, workers, beings that existed to serve and should know their place. Neither was entirely wrong, and neither was entirely right, and in the space between their perspectives, conflict was inevitable. The next generation of Anunnaki inherited this conflict. Enki's and Enlil's children became major players in the unfolding drama. Marduk was Enki's firstborn son, ambitious and proud, who believed he should inherit authority over Earth. Ninurta was Enlil's son, a mighty warrior who served as his father's enforcer. Inanna, also known as Ishtar, was Enlil's granddaughter, a goddess of love and war who would become one of the most complex and dangerous of all the Anunnaki. Nergal, another of Enki's sons, became lord of the underworld and a formidable military leader. Dumuzi, a son of Enki, was a shepherd god. Utu, a grandson of Enlil, was a god of justice and the sun. These divine personalities, with their ambitions, their loves, their jealousies, and their pride, would clash in ways that brought devastation to Earth. Feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort. The ancient world unfolds like a dream now. Let the names and faces blur if they will. What matters is the flow of the story, the slow current pulling you toward rest. The first great tragedy came in the form of Dumuzi and Inanna. Dumuzi, the shepherd son of Enki, fell in love with Inanna, the fiery granddaughter of Enlil. Their love seemed like it might bridge the divide between the two clans, uniting the warring factions through affection rather than conflict. But Marduk, Dumuzi's older brother, disapproved. He saw Inanna as manipulative and dangerous. He saw her as a pawn of the Enlilites, a way to bring Dumuzi into the opposing camp's influence. Marduk argued against the match, tried to convince his brother to abandon the relationship, but love, whether among gods or humans, does not follow logical commands. Dumuzi and Inanna planned to marry despite Marduk's objections. The wedding was set, celebrations were planned, and for a brief moment, peace seemed possible, but Marduk was not finished. He continued to speak against Inanna, continued to warn his brother, and in his youth and passion, Dumuzi felt torn between his brother's warnings and his love's embrace. The night before the wedding, tensions came to a head. In some versions of the story, Marduk confronted Dumuzi directly. Words were exchanged, accusations flew, and in the chaos of emotion and pride, Dumuzi fled, running into the night. He didn't watch where he was going. In the darkness, he stumbled, fell, and struck his head on stone. When they found him in the morning, Dumuzi was dead. Inanna's grief was terrible to behold, but grief quickly transformed into rage. She blamed Marduk, claimed he had murdered her beloved, had struck him down in jealous fury. Whether this was true or whether she genuinely believed it, the result was the same. Inanna demanded justice. Enlil, siding with his granddaughter, demanded that Marduk be punished, that he stand trial for the death of Dumuzi. Marduk fled, refusing to submit to Enlil's authority, and in his flight, the first true war among the Anunnaki began. Let the sound of ancient battles fade into the distance. Let them become like thunder heard far away, rumbling but not threatening. You are safe, comfortable, drifting. The Anunnaki divided into factions. On one side stood the Enlilites, those who followed Enlil's command and demanded Marduk's punishment. On the other stood the Enkites, those who supported Enki's claim that Marduk was innocent of murder, that Dumuzi's death had been a tragic accident blown out of proportion by Inanna's grief and rage. And in the middle stood humanity, watching as their gods went to war. The weapons the Anunnaki possessed were far beyond anything humans could understand or create. The texts speak of weapons that could shatter mountains, of beams of light that could melt stone, of devices that could shake the very earth. When the Anunnaki fought, the landscape itself was transformed. Cities were destroyed in moments, populations were scattered like leaves before a storm. Marduk retreated to Egypt, to the land of the Nile, where Enki's influence was strong. There, he established himself as Ra, the sun god, king of the Egyptian pantheon. He built his power base, gathering followers both among the Anunnaki loyal to his father and among humans who revered him. For a time, an uneasy peace held. Marduk remained in Egypt, and the Enlilites remained in Mesopotamia, with each side ruling their respective domains. But peace built on unresolved anger is fragile, and Inanna never forgot. She never forgave. Centuries passed, human civilization grew under the guidance and rule of the Anunnaki. Agriculture flourished, cities expanded, writing systems were developed to keep records of harvests, trade, and religious observances. Humanity was thriving, but they remained servants to the gods, their lives directed by divine will, their destinies shaped by conflicts they could barely comprehend. Your body is completely relaxed now. From your toes to your head, all tension has melted away. The story continues, but you need only listen as you might listen to rain on a roof, a pleasant sound accompanying your descent into sleep. Then came the deluge, the great flood that features in the mythologies of cultures around the world. According to the Anunnaki texts, this was no myth but a real event. a catastrophe that the Anunnaki leadership chose not to prevent. Enlil had grown increasingly frustrated with humanity. Their populations had exploded. They spread across every land. Their noise and chaos disrupted the peace Enlil craved. Moreover, he had learned that some Anunnaki had been breeding with humans, creating hybrid offspring called the Nephilim, giants who possessed both divine knowledge and human emotion. To Enlil, this was an abomination, a pollution of the pure Anunnaki bloodline, and a threat to the order he sought to maintain. When Anunnaki scientists detected that Nibiru's next passing through the inner solar system would destabilize the ice shelf of Antarctica, causing massive flooding, Enlil saw his opportunity. He called a council of the Anunnaki and made them swear an oath. They would not warn humanity, they would let the flood come, they would let it wash away the troublesome human population, and afterward they could start fresh with a smaller, more manageable number of servants. Most of the Anunnaki agreed, some reluctantly, some enthusiastically. But Enki could not accept this. He had created humanity. He had watched them grow and learn. He had taught them arts and sciences. He could not simply let them all die. But he had sworn the oath. He could not directly warn humanity without breaking his word and facing severe consequences from the other Anunnaki. So Enki found a loophole. He went to Ziusudra, known in other traditions as Utnapishtim or Noah, a human who had faithfully served him for years, and Enki spoke, but he spoke to a wall, not to the man. "Oh, wall," he said. Knowing Ziusudra was on the other side and could hear every word, "A terrible flood is coming. If someone were to build a large boat and load it with animals and seeds and his family, that someone might survive what is to come." Ziusudra understood. He built his ark, gathered his household, collected breeding pairs of animals, and waited. When the ice shelf collapsed and the great waves came, racing across the land and drowning everything in their path, Ziusudra and his floating refuge survived. The Anunnaki themselves retreated to orbit in their spacecraft, watching from above as the world they had ruled was transformed beneath the waters. Let the waters wash over your consciousness now. Let them carry away any remaining thoughts, any lingering worries. Let the flood become a cleansing wave that leaves only peace in its wake. When the waters receded, Enlil was furious to discover that humans had survived. He confronted Enki, knowing immediately who was responsible. But Enki stood firm. The deed was done. Humanity lived. And moreover, the other Anunnaki, looking down at the devastated earth, realized they needed humanity. Who would rebuild the cities? Who would work the fields and mines? Who would serve in the temples? Reluctantly, Enlil accepted the situation. Humanity would continue, but under stricter divine control. The world after the flood was divided more formally among the Anunnaki. Mesopotamia remained Enlil's primary domain, with various cities allocated to his children and grandchildren. Egypt and Africa were Enki's territory, with Marduk as the primary authority. The Indus Valley and regions to the east were given to other Anunnaki. And an uneasy peace settled over the earth once more, but Marduk's ambitions had only grown during his time in Egypt. He had built a powerful civilization. He had mastered the use of astronomical alignments and massive architectural projects. The pyramids rose under his direction, serving purposes both practical and symbolic. He gathered loyal followers among both Anunnaki and humans, and he began to believe that he, not the descendants of Enlil, should rule over all the earth. The age of Taurus was giving way to the age of Aries, an astrological transition that held deep significance for the Anunnaki. According to their beliefs and calculations, each age belonged to a different ruling god. Marduk calculated that the age of Aries was rightfully his time to rule, his destined moment to take supreme authority. But Enlil and his clan had no intention of giving up their power. Your breathing is barely perceptible now, so slow, so gentle. Sleep is near, just beyond the next sentence, the next image, the next soft word. The tensions finally erupted into open warfare around 4,000 years ago. Marduk declared himself supreme ruler and demanded the submission of the other Anunnaki cities. The Enlilites refused. Ninurta, Enlil's warrior son, mobilized forces. Inanna, still bitter from Dumuzi's death decades of centuries before, eagerly joined the campaign against Marduk. Nergal, brother to Marduk but lord of his own domain, was caught between loyalties. The war that followed was devastating. The weapons the Anunnaki employed were described in the ancient texts with language that modern readers find eerily familiar. Weapons that released terrible light and heat. Weapons that left the land poisoned for years afterward. Weapons that created mushroom-shaped clouds and winds of death. Some scholars believe these descriptions reference nuclear weapons or their equivalent. Technologies so advanced they seemed like magic to the humans who witnessed their effects. Cities were destroyed in the conflict. Sodom and Gomorrah, the biblical cities of sin, may have been casualties of this war, destroyed not by divine judgment of human wickedness, but by weapons fired in a conflict between warring Anunnaki factions. The texts speak of a wind of death that swept across the land afterward, killing indiscriminately, a wind that might have been radioactive fallout. Even the victors found the cost too high. Large areas of land were rendered uninhabitable. Populations were decimated not just by the weapons but by the famine and disease that followed. And more importantly, the Anunnaki themselves were diminished. Some were killed in the fighting, others were so horrified by the destruction that they left Earth entirely, returning to Nibiru or relocating to other outposts in the solar system. Imagine those final battles now, but imagine them fading, becoming distant, becoming less important. The flash of terrible weapons becomes the gentle flash of fireflies on a summer evening. The sounds of destruction become the gentle rustling of leaves. The fear and rage of gods becomes nothing more than a story told long ago, meaning little now as you drift towards sleep. The wars ended not with a clear victory but with exhaustion. Marduk held Babylon and proclaimed it the new centre of the world. He established himself as the supreme god in Mesopotamian religion, with the other gods reduced to subordinate roles in the pantheon. The Enlilites retained influence in other cities and regions, but their absolute authority was broken, and humanity, having suffered through divine conflicts beyond their control or understanding, began the slow process of rebuilding. But something had changed. The Anunnaki began to withdraw from direct governance of human affairs, whether because of losses suffered in the war, because of moral exhaustion at the scale of destruction they had unleashed, or because Nibiru's orbit was carrying them away from Earth. The gods became less present, less involved. They still received worship, still communicated through priests and prophets, still occasionally intervened in human events, but the age of gods walking openly among humans was coming to an end. Human civilization entered a new phase. Without the constant direct supervision of the Anunnaki, human rulers claimed authority in their own right. The first true human kingdoms emerged, with kings who claimed descent from the gods, but who ruled by their own power. Writing evolved from simple record-keeping to literature and law codes. Science and philosophy began to emerge as humans sought to understand the world without simply accepting divine decree. The memory of the Anunnaki persisted in religion and mythology. The gods of Sumer became the gods of Babylon, who became the gods of Assyria, who influenced the gods of Greece and Rome and countless other cultures. The stories were retold, embellished, adapted to new contexts, but the core narrative remained. Beings from the sky who shaped human destiny, who loved and fought and schemed, whose conflicts played out on Earth with humanity caught in the middle. You're so deeply relaxed now. The ancient world is fading into the mist of dreams. Let it go. Let all of it fade. The names, the battles, the gods and their anger and their ambitions, all of it receding like a tide going out, leaving only peace behind. Modern scholars debate the nature of the Anunnaki texts. Were they mythology, stories invented to explain the unknown? Were they garbled histories, real events filtered through the lens of primitive understanding? Or were they, as some suggest more literal than we generally accept, actual records of ancient astronauts who came to Earth in humanity's deep past? The physical evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive. Ancient Sumerian knowledge of astronomy was remarkably sophisticated, including awareness of planets that shouldn't have been visible without telescopes. Their mathematical system, based on the number 60, was highly advanced, and forms the basis for how we still measure time and angles today. The technological achievements of the ancient world, the precise stone cutting, the massive constructions, the sophisticated understanding of acoustics and optics, all of these suggest knowledge that seems beyond what we would expect from early civilizations. But whether the Anunnaki were literal beings from another world or powerful symbolic representations of natural forces and human struggles, their story has endured for over 4,000 years, And there is something in that story that continues to resonate with people, something that speaks to deep questions about human origins, human purpose, and the relationship between the powerful and the powerless. Perhaps what draws us to the story of the Anunnaki is the way it mirrors human experience. The conflicts between Enki and Enlil, between compassion and order, between innovation and tradition, between different visions of how society should be organised, these are conflicts that continue in every human community. The tragedy of Dumuzi and Inanna, of love destroyed by pride and misunderstanding, echoes in countless human relationships. The ambition of Marduk, seeking recognition and authority he feels he deserves, reflects the ambition present in every person who has ever felt overlooked or undervalued. And the humans in the story, caught in divine conflicts beyond their control, working to survive and thrive despite the chaos around them, aren't they like all of us, trying to make meaningful lives in a world shaped by forces larger than ourselves? Your mind is quiet now. Thoughts drift by without catching, like clouds moving across a twilight sky. The story is ending, winding down, coming to its natural rest. After the Great Wars, as the age of direct divine intervention waned, humanity had to chart its own course. We retained the gifts the Anunnaki had given us, the knowledge of agriculture and mathematics, of writing and architecture, of astronomy and medicine. We built on those foundations, creating civilizations of our own, developing arts and sciences, exploring the world and eventually the cosmos beyond it. The temples to the old gods gradually fell silent. The ziggurats crumbled or were buried under wind-blown sand. New religions emerged, monotheistic faiths that transformed the many gods into one, that reinterpreted the old stories through new theological lenses. The Anunnaki became angels and demons, became myths and legends, became ancient history studied by archaeologists and historians, but no longer worshipped, no longer feared, no longer present in the daily consciousness of humanity. Yet something of them remains. In every act of human creativity, perhaps we echo Enki's gift of knowledge. In every establishment of law and order, perhaps we hear Enlil's demand for structure. In every ambition to rise above our station, perhaps we channel Marduk's pride. In every act of love that bridges divides, perhaps we remember Dumuzi and Inanna, and we hope for a better ending. The stars above us are the same stars that shone on ancient Sumer, the same stars that looked down on the first cities, on the floods and wars, on the rise and fall of divine ages. And as you look up at those stars, or rather, as you imagine looking up at them, for your eyes are closed now, heavy with sleep, you might wonder what other stories they hold, what other conflicts and loves and ambitions played out under their ancient light. But those are thoughts for another time. For now, let there be only rest, only the gentle darkness behind your eyelids, only the slow rhythm of your breathing, only the soft embrace of sleep. The wars of the Anunnaki are over. The conflicts of gods and kings have faded into history. All that remains is the quiet, the stillness, the peace of deep rest. Let yourself fall into that peace now. Let go of the story. Let go of the names and battles. Let go of everything except the simple, beautiful act of sleeping. In ancient Mesopotamia, they believed that sleep was a gift from the gods, a time when the boundary between the divine and human realms grew thin, when dreams could carry messages from beyond the waking world. Whether or not the gods were real, sleep is certainly real, and it is indeed a gift, a time when the body heals and the mind processes and integrates the experiences of the day. Give yourself to that gift now. Accept the rest you have earned. The world will be there when you wake, but for now, let it all fade away. The Anunnaki came from the stars, and now you drift among the stars yourself, floating in the peaceful darkness of space, watching the slow wheel of galaxies, feeling the gentle pull of cosmic currents, moving through the quiet vastness with nothing to fear and nowhere you need to be. You are safe, you are comfortable, you are deeply, profoundly relaxed. Every part of your body is heavy, at rest, released from the tension of the day. Your mind is quiet, thoughts diminishing to barely a whisper, then to nothing at all. Just the darkness, just the peace, just the gentle descent into sleep. The silence of deep space surrounds you now. In this vast emptiness there is no conflict, no struggle, only the eternal dance of celestial bodies moving through the void. And as you drift deeper into relaxation, deeper toward the welcoming embrace of sleep, let us continue our journey through the ancient world, through the time when gods and humans shared the earth, when every sunrise might bring divine intervention, and when the fate of civilizations rested in the hands of beings who claimed descent from the stars. The aftermath of the great Anunnaki Wars left the ancient world transformed. Cities that had stood for thousands of years lay in ruins. Trade routes that had connected distant civilizations were disrupted. The great libraries, repositories of knowledge accumulated over millennia, were damaged or destroyed. And the survivors, both Anunnaki and human, faced the monumental task of rebuilding from the ashes of divine conflict. Breathe slowly now. Feel each breath fill your lungs completely, then release, carrying away any remaining tension. The ancient world unfolds before your mind's eye, but you observe it from a place of perfect calm, perfect safety, perfect rest. In Babylon, Marduk consolidated his power. The city became the centre of a new religious and political order. The great temple of Esagila rose at the city's heart, a massive ziggurat that reached toward the heavens, symbolising Marduk's claim to supreme authority among the gods. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, was written during this time, recasting older Sumerian myths to place Marduk at the centre of cosmic history. In this new narrative, Marduk was the hero who defeated the primordial chaos monster Tiamat and created the ordered universe from her body, establishing himself as king of the gods by right of conquest and creative power. But stories are not just stories. They are assertions of authority, declarations of legitimacy, arguments made through metaphor and myth. When the priests of Babylon recited the Enuma Elish during the New Year festival, they were not merely entertaining worshippers. They were reinforcing Marduk's claim to rule, reminding everyone, human and Anunnaki alike, that the current order was established by divine right and backed by divine power. The other Anunnaki adapted to this new reality in various ways. Some accepted Marduk's supremacy, at least nominally, and retained their positions as subordinate deities in the pantheon. Others withdrew to their own domains, maintaining independence through distance and the difficulty of enforcing authority across vast territories with diminished resources. Still others disappeared from human awareness entirely, either departing Earth completely or retreating into secrecy, their activities hidden from the humans who had once worshipped them openly. Let your eyelids grow heavier still, so heavy that the very thought of opening them seems impossible, unnecessary. There is nothing to see in the waking world that matters now, only the gentle visions playing across the screen of your inner consciousness, only the slow unfolding of ancient history. In Egypt, the transition was equally profound. The age of the great pyramid builders had passed. The Old Kingdom, that golden age when the monuments of Giza rose from the desert sands, had collapsed into chaos during the first intermediate period. When stability returned with the Middle Kingdom, the pharaohs claimed less direct divine authority. They were still gods, still incarnations of Horus, still divine mediators between humanity and the cosmic order, but there was a subtle shift in emphasis. The pharaohs became more human, more accessible, more concerned with justice and proper governance than with displays of overwhelming supernatural power. Some scholars who study the ancient texts believe this shift reflects the Anunnaki's withdrawal. Without gods physically present to rule and perform miracles, human kings had to rely more on human qualities, leadership and wisdom and military skill, rather than simply channeling divine will. The gods still existed in the religious framework, still received offerings and prayers, still intervened in dreams and visions, but they no longer walked the streets of cities in physical form, no longer sat in visible judgment over their subjects. The land between the rivers, Mesopotamia, saw a succession of empires rise and fall. After Babylon came the Assyrians, fierce warriors from the north who built an empire through military might and ruthless efficiency. The Assyrian kings claimed divine mandate from Ashur, their supreme god, but Ashur was essentially Enlil under a different name, the old god of authority and order adapted to Assyrian culture and needs. The Assyrians were masters of warfare. They developed tactics and weapons that made them nearly unstoppable on the battlefield. Iron weapons, siege engines, cavalry tactics, psychological warfare through calculated brutality. All of these gave Assyria dominance over the ancient Near East for centuries. But their success came at a cost. They were feared but not loved. The populations they conquered resented Assyrian rule and rebelled whenever opportunity arose, and in their religious texts we find echoes of the old conflicts between Anunnaki factions, translated now into geopolitical struggles between nations and kingdoms. Your body has achieved perfect stillness. You might not even feel it anymore, so complete is your relaxation. Your awareness without form, consciousness without tension, mind without anxiety. And in this state, the ancient past seems almost more real than the present, more vivid than your own temporal existence. The Assyrian Empire eventually overextended itself. Rebellions drained resources, external enemies sensed weakness, and in 6 and 12 BCE, a coalition of Babylonians and Medes besieged and destroyed Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, with such thoroughness that the city disappeared from history, its very location forgotten until archaeologists rediscovered it in the 19th century. But from Assyria's fall came one final resurgence of Babylonian power under King Nebuchadnezzar II. He rebuilt Babylon into one of the ancient world's greatest cities. The Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, were supposedly created by his command. The Ishtar Gate, with its brilliant blue-glazed bricks and golden reliefs of dragons and bulls, welcomed visitors into a city of unprecedented splendour. And the Tower of Babel, the great ziggurat at Enki, was restored to its former glory, rising in 7 stages to a height of perhaps 300 feet, a monument to human ambition and divine presence. Nebuchadnezzar was a complex figure, powerful and ambitious, cruel in warfare yet sophisticated in peace, deeply religious yet pragmatic in politics. He saw himself as Marduk's chosen instrument on earth, the human king who would establish divine order across the known world. He conquered Jerusalem, destroyed Solomon's temple, and carried the Jewish elite into Babylonian exile. Yet he also protected religious freedom within his empire, allowing diverse peoples to worship their own gods, as long as they acknowledged Babylon's political supremacy. Drift deeper now. The names and dates, the kings and kingdoms, let them blur together into a general impression of vast ages passing, of human civilization developing and changing, while always carrying forward echoes of its divine origins. The Jewish exile in Babylon had profound effects on the development of monotheism. Exposed to Babylonian myths and religious concepts, Jewish scribes and priests worked to distinguish their traditions from the polytheistic cultures surrounding them. The creation story in Genesis, the flood narrative, the Tower of Babel account, all of these show clear influence from Mesopotamian sources, but reinterpreted through a monotheistic lens. The many gods became one god. The conflicts among divine beings became conflicts between God and humanity, or between God and angels, or between God and chaos itself. Some scholars suggest that Yahweh, the God of Israel, has attributes borrowed from both Enlil and Enki. The stern lawgiver, who demands obedience and punishes transgression, that's Enlil. The creator who forms humanity from clay and breathes life into it, who walks in the garden in the cool of the day, who is troubled when humans suffer, that's Enki. The synthesis of these aspects into a single deity represents a theological revolution, but one rooted in the old Anunnaki narratives. Your consciousness is fading now, thinning like morning mist under the rising sun. Soon there will be only sleep, only dreams, or the absence of dreams, only the deep restorative darkness. But first, a bit more of the story. Just a bit more, gentle and quiet, carrying you the rest of the way down. The Persian Empire rose next, under Cyrus the Great, who conquered Babylon in 539 BCE without a battle. The city gates opened to him, the priests of Marduk welcomed him as a liberator, and Babylonian power transferred to a new dynasty. Cyrus was remarkably tolerant for an ancient conqueror. He allowed the exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. He respected local customs and religions throughout his empire. Under Persian rule, the ancient Near East enjoyed a period of relative peace and prosperity. But the old gods were fading now. Ahura Mazda, the Persian supreme deity, was a more abstract concept than Marduk or Enlil, more cosmic principle than anthropomorphic being. Zoroastrianism, the Persian religion, conceived of existence as a struggle between truth and lie, light and darkness, order and chaos, but these were universal forces, not individual beings with personal agendas and family dramas. The Age of Gods, walking among humans, was definitively ending. The Anunnaki, if they still existed, had become distant, abstract, perhaps departed entirely. Human civilization was learning to function without direct divine intervention, developing philosophies and ethical systems based on human reason and observation rather than revealed divine law. In Greece, philosophers began questioning the very nature of the gods. Were they real beings or merely personifications of natural forces? Did they actually intervene in human affairs, or were they simply explanations for phenomena people didn't yet understand scientifically? Plato proposed a single transcendent good beyond the multiplicity of gods. Aristotle suggested an unmoved mover, a divine principle that set the universe in motion but did not directly interfere in its operation. Let these philosophical musings wash over you like waves lapping at a shore. Interesting perhaps, but not urgent, not demanding your attention. Let them carry you further into the gentle dark. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire and spread Greek culture across the ancient world. The Hellenistic period that followed saw a blending of traditions. Greek gods were identified with Egyptian and Mesopotamian gods. Zeus became equivalent to Marduk and Amun. Aphrodite became equivalent to Ishtar and Astarte. The old Anunnaki, already transformed and adapted through successive cultures, became even more diffused, their individual identities blending into a cosmopolitan religious synthesis. And then came Rome, practical and pragmatic, adopting gods from every culture it conquered, and fitting them into its own pantheon. The Romans were less interested in theological purity than in functional effectiveness. If a god seemed powerful, worship that god. If a ritual seemed to work, perform that ritual. Religion was a matter of maintaining the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, ensuring that divine forces remained favourably disposed toward Rome, through proper observance and sacrifice. But even as the Roman Empire reached its greatest extent, controlling the Mediterranean world and beyond, the old gods were dying. Christianity emerged from the Jewish tradition, proclaiming one God and one path to salvation. This new religion spread rapidly through the empire, offering things the old gods could not: a personal relationship with the divine, forgiveness of sins, eternal life, and a community of believers bound together by love rather than by ethnicity or geography. The Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity in the 4th century CE, and the old gods were suddenly on the defensive. Their temples were closed or converted to churches. Their rituals were banned as pagan superstition. Their stories were preserved only as mythology, cautionary tales of the false beliefs that predated enlightenment through Christ. You're so close to sleep now, so very close. Just a few more soft words to carry you over the threshold. What happened to the Anunnaki themselves? Did they watch from afar as humanity forgot them, as their temples crumbled and their names were erased? Did they mourn the loss of worship, or did they feel relief at finally being free from the burden of governing a species that had outgrown its need for divine masters? Perhaps they returned to Nibiru when its orbit next carried it through the inner solar system. Perhaps they established colonies elsewhere, on Mars or the moons of Jupiter, watching Earth from a distance but no longer intervening. Perhaps they simply died, their long lives finally ending, their advanced technology unable to grant true immortality. Or perhaps, as some believers maintain, they are still here, hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves once more. Perhaps they observe us, their created children now spread across the earth in billions, masters of technologies they might recognize, on the verge of spreading into space ourselves. Perhaps they watch with pride or concern or simply curiosity as we approach the moment when we might join them among the stars. But these are questions without answers, mysteries that remain unsolved despite millennia of human inquiry, and mysteries need not trouble you now. Let them dissolve like salt in water, present but imperceptible, part of the background rather than the foreground of consciousness. The wars of the Anunnaki are ancient history now, so ancient that we cannot even be certain they truly happened as the texts describe. But whether literal truth or symbolic narrative, the stories convey wisdom about power and ambition, love and loss, the relationships between rulers and ruled, the dangers of hubris, and the resilience of life even in the face of divine conflict. Humanity survived the wars of the gods. We survived the flood. We survived the weapons that turned cities to glass and filled the air with poison. We survived abandonment by our creators, and we built civilizations that rival or exceed anything the Anunnaki themselves achieved on Earth. We reached the moon. We sent probes beyond the solar system. We split the atom and mapped the genome. We created artificial intelligence and quantum computers. We became, in many ways, the gods we once worshipped. And yet, for all our advancement, we still struggle with the same fundamental issues that plague the Anunnaki. We still fight wars over resources and ideology. We still wrestle with the balance between freedom and order, compassion and justice, innovation and tradition. We still fall in love and suffer heartbreak. We still dream of glory and sometimes destroy what we love in pursuit of it. Perhaps that is the deepest truth of the Anunnaki myths. Not that they are literally true in every detail, but that they reflect eternal patterns of consciousness and conflict, themes that repeat across scales from divine to human, from cosmic to personal. Your breathing is barely perceptible now, so slow and shallow that you seem hardly to breathe at all. Your heartbeat is calm and steady. Your body temperature has dropped slightly as metabolism slows. All the physical signs of approaching deep sleep. In the ancient world, they understood that stories served multiple purposes. Yes, they entertained. Yes, they preserved history and cultural memory, but they also induced altered states of consciousness. The rhythmic recitation of epic poems, the repetitive structure of mythological narratives, the progression from conflict to resolution, all of these serve to quiet the active mind and open pathways to deeper awareness. The Anunnaki Wars, told properly, are a meditation on impermanence. Gods who seemed eternal passed away. Empires that seemed invincible fell to dust. Technologies that appeared magical became mysteries. The mighty were brought low. The low were raised up. Everything changed. Everything transformed. The only constant was change itself. And in recognizing that impermanence, there is paradoxically a kind of peace. If nothing lasts forever, then our troubles are temporary. Our pain will pass. Our anxiety will fade. Even consciousness itself will eventually dissolve into sleep, that small rehearsal for the final sleep that awaits us all at the end of life. But do not think of that final sleep now. Think only of this present sleep, this welcome rest, this nightly gift that restores and heals. Let yourself fall fully into it now. Let the last threads of waking consciousness dissolve. The Anunnaki came from the stars. They shaped human destiny. They warred among themselves. They withdrew from the world. And now only their stories remain, told and retold, adapted and transformed, preserved through 4,000 years because something in them resonates with human experience across cultures and ages. You have heard one version of those stories tonight. Tomorrow, you will barely remember the details. But the deep rest they carried you toward, that will remain. The peace they induced, that will persist. And perhaps, in some subtle way, the wisdom embedded in the ancient narratives will work on your unconscious mind, offering insights you cannot articulate but nonetheless possess. Sleep now, fully and completely. The story is told. The ancient battles are silent. The gods have departed. Only rest remains. Let the darkness embrace you. Let consciousness fade entirely. Let sleep work its healing magic through the deep watches of the night. And in the morning you will wake refreshed, renewed, carrying forward the gift of rest into whatever challenges await you. But the morning is hours away yet. For now, there is only the night. Only the quiet. Only the peace. Only sleep. Deep, restorative, healing sleep. The Anunnaki Wars are over. Your war with wakefulness is over. All conflict has ceased. All effort has ended. There is only surrender to the natural rhythm of rest. Fall, drift, sleep. Dream peacefully, or do not dream at all. Either way, rest. The stars above watch the rise of the Anunnaki. They watch their wars and their peace. They watch them depart or fade, and now those same stars watch over you, distant and cold and indifferent perhaps, but also constant, reliable, eternal patterns in the night sky. Under those stars, let yourself finally, fully, completely sleep. Rest well, dear listener. Rest deeply. Let hours pass in peaceful oblivion, and when you wake, may you be restored. But for now, sleep. Simply sleep. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more is expected. Only sleep. The Anunnaki have faded into legend. You fade into dreams. The ancient world dissolves into mist, and all that remains is the gentle dark, the soft silence, the perfect stillness of deep sleep. Good night. Sleep well. Rest peacefully. The wars are over, the story is told. Sleep now, sleep. Yet if consciousness persists, if some part of you remains aware even as you drift in the borderlands between waking and sleep, let us continue just a bit further. For the story of the Anunnaki does not truly end with their departure. Their legacy continued, echoing through the millennia in ways both obvious and subtle. The great religions that emerged after the Anunnaki withdrew all carry traces of those ancient stories. The concept of fallen angels in Christianity and Islam reflects the Watchers, those Anunnaki who bred with humans and were punished for it. The hierarchy of angels and archangels mirrors the hierarchy of the Anunnaki pantheon. The apocalyptic visions of final battles between divine forces, found in Revelation and other texts, echo the wars between Anunnaki factions. Even the structure of religious authority reflects Anunnaki patterns. The king-priest model, where political and religious authority combine in a single figure, comes directly from the Anunnaki period when gods ruled as kings, and kings claimed divine status. The temple complexes with their inner sanctums accessible only to initiates, their rituals performed by a hereditary priesthood, their agricultural tithes supporting the religious establishment, all of this was established during the Anunnaki era and carried forward into later religions. Let these observations float through your drowsy mind without catching, without demanding attention. They are true whether you engage with them or not. The current of history flows on regardless of individual awareness. In the hidden teachings, the esoteric traditions that developed alongside mainstream religions, the Anunnaki remained more explicitly present. Gnostic texts spoke of the archons, rulers of the material world who kept humanity trapped in ignorance. These archons closely resemble the Anunnaki in their role as creators and controllers of humanity. The Gnostic creation story, where humanity is fashioned by lesser divine beings rather than the supreme god, directly parallels the Anunnaki narrative where Enki and Ninmah create humans as workers. Hermetic philosophy, alchemy, Kabbalah, and other Western esoteric traditions all contain echoes of Anunnaki knowledge. The alchemical goal of transforming base metals into gold might represent a distorted memory of the Anunnaki's gold mining and processing operations. The Kabbalistic tree of life, with its multiple levels of divine emanation, resembles the Anunnaki hierarchy. The Hermetic principle, as above, so below, suggesting correspondence between celestial and terrestrial realms, reflects the Anunnaki model where events on Earth mirrored conflicts in heaven. But these are details for scholars and mystics. For you, drifting now in the comfortable darkness, they need only be sounds, words with weight and rhythm but no urgent meaning, gentle audio patterns that lull rather than stimulate. In the medieval period, the old gods transformed again. They became demons in Christian demonology. Marduk might be identified with one of the princes of hell. Ishtar became associated with Lilith, or other female demons. The pantheon that once received worship now served as cautionary examples of the false gods that led humanity astray before the revelation of Christ. Yet paradoxically, learned people studied these false gods intensely. The Renaissance saw a revival of interest in classical learning, and with it came renewed attention to ancient mythologies, including the Mesopotamian sources that predated Greek and Roman traditions. Scholars pored over Herodotus's accounts of Babylon. Archaeologists began excavating ancient sites. Cuneiform tablets were collected and eventually deciphered. In the 19th century, when scholars finally learned to read cuneiform writing, the world of the ancient Near East suddenly opened before Western eyes. The Epic of Gilgamesh was recovered, revealing a flood story older than the biblical account. The Enuma Elish showed that the Genesis creation narrative had antecedents, and gradually the Anunnaki emerged from obscurity, no longer merely demons or false gods, but complex figures from humanity's deep past. You need not follow this intellectual history closely. Let it be background, let it be texture, let it be the gentle static between you and complete unconsciousness. You're so close now to full sleep that these words barely register, barely disturb the profound calm that has settled over you. In the 20th century, a new interpretation of the Anunnaki emerged. Writers like Zecharia Sitchin proposed that the ancient texts should be read not as mythology, but as historical documentation of alien visitation. According to this view, the Anunnaki were extraterrestrials from a distant planet who came to Earth for its resources, genetically engineered humans to serve as workers, and whose activities and conflicts were recorded in the ancient myths. This ancient astronaut theory found a receptive audience in an age that had achieved spaceflight and was actively searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. The idea that gods were actually aliens made intuitive sense to many people. It explained the seemingly advanced knowledge found in ancient texts. It accounted for the global distribution of similar myths, and it reframed religious narratives in terms compatible with scientific materialism. Critics pointed out numerous problems with the ancient astronaut hypothesis. The astronomical data cited was often inaccurate. The translations of ancient texts were frequently tendentious or simply wrong. The arguments relied on selective evidence and ignored contradictory information. Nevertheless, the theory persisted and even flourished, spawning television shows, books, conferences, and a subculture of believers convinced that ancient aliens had shaped human history. But whether the Anunnaki were literal extraterrestrials, mythological representations of natural forces, distant memories of an advanced prehistoric human civilization, or pure invention, the stories themselves have demonstrated remarkable staying power. 4,000 years after they were first written down, people still tell them, still find meaning in them, still use them as frameworks for understanding human experience. Perhaps this is the ultimate legacy of the Anunnaki, not any particular truth claim about their existence or nature, but simply the enduring power of the stories themselves. Stories that speak to fundamental human concerns. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What is our purpose? Why is there suffering? Why do the powerful conflict? How should we relate to authority? What happens when knowledge is forbidden? What are the consequences of ambition? These questions remain relevant across time and culture. The Anunnaki narratives offer one set of answers, not necessarily the correct answers or the only answers, but answers that have satisfied millions of people across many generations. And tonight, these ancient answers have served another purpose. They have carried you to the edge of sleep, perhaps over it by now. Your consciousness has narrowed to a point, dimmed to near extinction. Soon, if not already, you will be fully asleep, dreaming or dreamless, your body and mind taking the rest they need. The wars of the Anunnaki fade now into complete insignificance. What does it matter whether gods fought thousands of years ago? What does it matter whether they were real or imagined? The only reality that matters is the reality of this moment, your comfortable body, your quiet mind, your approaching or achieved sleep. Let the ancient world dissolve completely. Let Mesopotamia and Egypt, Sumer and Babylon, Enki and Enlil, Marduk and Inanna, all of them fade to nothing. They are gone, long gone, if they ever existed at all. Only you remain. Only this moment. Only rest. The voice that tells the story is itself fading now, growing softer, more distant, less distinct. Soon it will be gone entirely, and there will be only silence, only darkness, only sleep. Fall away from consciousness now. Let the last tenuous thread of awareness break. Surrender completely to sleep's embrace. There is nothing to resist, nothing to hold on to, nothing to maintain. Simply let go, simply sleep. The Anunnaki came from the stars and returned to the stars. You descend from wakefulness into sleep. In both cases, a journey into the unknown, but not a frightening unknown, rather a welcoming one, a natural transition, an expected and necessary passage. Sleep now, fully, completely, deeply, without reservation or resistance. The story is finished. The ancient battles are silent. The gods have departed. The voice fades. The words cease. Only sleep remains. Deep, peaceful, healing sleep. Rest well. Good night. Sleep. And yet, for those whose minds resist even the gentlest invitation to rest, let us venture even further into the ancient world, exploring corners of the Anunnaki narrative not yet touched, diving deeper into the mythology, the archaeology, the interpretations and implications of these stories that have shaped human consciousness for millennia. After the Great Wars, after Marduk's ascension, after the Anunnaki withdrew from direct rule, human civilization entered what we might call the Age of Divine Twilight. The gods were still present in the religious and cultural consciousness, still worshipped in temples, still invoked in prayers, still credited with blessings and blamed for disasters, but they were no longer physically manifest in the ways the ancient texts described. This transition was not sudden. It happened gradually over centuries, so slowly that no single generation would have noticed the change. But comparing the early dynastic period of Sumer around 2900 BCE with the Neo-Babylonian period around 600 BCE, the difference is striking. In the earlier period, kings claimed to speak directly with gods, who appeared to them in dreams and visions, who gave specific commands about military campaigns and temple construction. By the later period, divine communication was more ambiguous, more mediated through professional priests and diviners, more subject to interpretation. What caused this transition? Believers in the literal alien interpretation suggest the Anunnaki simply left Earth, returning to Nibiru or relocating to other planets. Their departure left humanity on its own, forcing us to develop independence and self-governance. The memory of their presence persisted in religion, but the reality had departed. Mythological interpreters suggest that the change reflects human psychological development. As human civilization became more complex, our understanding of causation became more sophisticated. We gradually learned to distinguish between natural phenomena and divine action, between coincidence and providence, between our own agency and external control. The gods didn't leave. Rather, we stopped projecting them onto every unexplained occurrence. Historical interpreters note that the transition coincides with the rise of larger, more bureaucratic empires. In small city-states, a king could plausibly claim direct divine guidance. But as kingdoms grew into empires encompassing diverse populations and cultures, religious authority had to become more institutionalized, more systematized, less dependent on individual revelation. The gods didn't leave. The organizational structure of religion changed to serve imperial needs. Each interpretation has merit, each explains certain aspects of the transition, and each leaves certain questions unanswered. Your mind is wandering now, not following the argument closely, not tracking the logic, simply floating through ideas like a leaf floating on a stream, carried by the current toward an unknown destination. This is good. This is progress towards sleep. Let the intellectual content become pure sound, pure rhythm, pure soporific vibration. Among the many Anunnaki, certain figures deserve deeper exploration, for their stories contain archetypal patterns that resonate through all subsequent mythology and literature. Inanna, goddess of love and war, queen of heaven, most complex of all the Anunnaki deities. She was simultaneously virgin and sacred prostitute, creator and destroyer, compassionate and cruel. Her myths show her in countless roles: ambitious goddess who tricks her way into power, grieving lover mourning her dead beloved, warrior leading armies into battle, judge sitting in the underworld. The most famous Inanna myth describes her descent into the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. Inanna passed through 7 gates, surrendering 1 item of divine power at each gate until she stood naked and powerless before her sister. Ereshkigal killed her, hung her corpse on a hook, and left her to rot. Only through the intervention of Enki, who sent mourners to sympathize with Ereshkigal's pain, was Inanna restored to life. This myth has been interpreted in countless ways, as an astronomical allegory, with Inanna representing Venus, which disappears from view for periods before returning, as an agricultural myth, with Inanna's death and resurrection representing the cycle of seasons, as a psychological journey, with the descent representing ego death and the return representing spiritual rebirth, as a political statement about the relationship between overworld and underworld powers, but perhaps most powerfully, the myth speaks to the human experience of loss and recovery. Everyone has descended into their own underworld, faced their own death of spirit or hope, hung naked and powerless before forces beyond their control. And those who return, who are resurrected or rescued, emerge changed, stripped of former certainties, humbled but also strengthened by having survived the unsurvivable. Inanna's story resonates because it maps the topology of trauma and healing, and hearing it, even in your current state of near sleep, some part of you recognizes that pattern, relates to that journey, finds comfort in the knowledge that the goddess descended and returned, that death and resurrection are part of the cosmic order. Let that comfort deepen your relaxation. Let the archetypal pattern work on your unconscious mind, suggesting that whatever you have endured or will endure, the path leads through darkness but not into permanent darkness, that descent is followed by return, that death precedes rebirth. Nergal, lord of the underworld, represents another archetypal pattern. He was originally a sky god, but he descended to the underworld and became its ruler after a complicated courtship with Ereshkigal. His domains were plague, war, and death, yet he was also a god of healing, for one who understood death could potentially prevent it. The paradox of Nergal, destroyer and healer united in a single figure reflects a profound truth about existence. Destruction and creation are not opposites but complements. Death clears the way for new life. Disease forces the body to develop stronger immune responses. Suffering can lead to wisdom. The warrior knows peace better than the sheltered, for he has experienced war's alternative. In Anunnaki mythology, Nergal participated in the Great Wars, wielding weapons of terrible power. But in the aftermath, he withdrew to the underworld, presiding over the dead rather than contributing to the creation of more dead. Perhaps this represents choice, a deliberate stepping away from the cycle of violence, an acceptance of a darker role, but one that at least doesn't perpetuate the conflict. You need not puzzle over these meanings. They work on you regardless of conscious engagement. The stories carry their own weight, their own significance. You need only rest and let them do their work. Ningishzida, the serpent god, represents yet another pattern. Associated with vegetation, healing, and the underworld, depicted as a serpent or dragon, Ningishzida was a god of transformation and rebirth. Serpents shed their skin and appear renewed. They move between Earth's surface and underground realms. They represent both danger and healing, their venom both poison and medicine. Across cultures, the serpent carries this dual symbolism. In Eden, the serpent brings knowledge and doom. In Moses' staff, the serpent brings healing. In Asian traditions, dragons represent imperial power and cosmic force. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl the feathered serpent is a god of wisdom and wind. The pattern repeats because the serpent embodies transformation itself, the dangerous passage from one state to another, the ambiguous space between categories. Ningishzida may have been associated with Tammuz, the dying and rising god whose death was mourned annually and whose resurrection celebrated. This mythic pattern, the god who dies and returns, appears throughout the ancient world. Osiris in Egypt, Dionysus in Greece, Attis in Phrygia, Adonis in the Levant, and eventually Jesus in Christianity. The dying and rising god represents the agricultural cycle, yes, but also the human cycle of loss and recovery, despair and hope, death and life. These patterns work themselves deep into human consciousness. We tell and retell these stories because they help us process our own experiences of transformation, loss, and renewal. And tonight they help carry you through the transformation from waking to sleeping, through the small death of consciousness into the renewal of rest. Your body is completely still now, your breathing is slow and shallow, your heart rate has dropped, your core temperature has lowered slightly. All the physiological markers indicate deep relaxation approaching or achieving sleep. Yet some part of you still listens, still processes, still drifts through the story. The Anunnaki built cities, and those cities had specific symbolic structures. At the centre stood the ziggurat, the massive stepped pyramid that served as both temple and cosmic axis. The ziggurat connected heaven and earth, providing a physical location where divine and human realms could interact. The priests would climb the ziggurat stairs in ritualized processions, ascending from the human world toward the divine realm, then descending to bring divine wisdom back to the people. This vertical cosmology, with heaven above and earth below, with gods dwelling in high places and humans dwelling below, has shaped religious architecture and thought for thousands of years. Churches strive upward with spires and vaulted ceilings. Mosques reach skyward with minarets. Temples are built on mountaintops or on artificial mountains. The spatial metaphor equates good with up and evil with down, divine with high and mortal with low. But the Anunnaki ziggurat was more than mere symbolism. According to some interpretations, it served practical purposes: astronomical observatory, communications device, power generator, or landing platform for aerial vehicles. The precise alignments with celestial bodies, the specific measurements and proportions, the materials used in construction, all suggest purposes beyond simple monument building. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza, built during the Old Kingdom of Egypt, when Anunnaki influence was supposedly still strong. Its construction remains partially mysterious. How were millions of stone blocks, some weighing dozens of tons, transported and placed with such precision? How were the internal chambers and passages excavated and aligned so exactly? How did the builders achieve astronomical alignments accurate to fractions of a degree? Conventional archaeology provides answers: massive labour forces, copper tools, simple machines like ramps and levers, careful planning and accumulated expertise. These answers are probably correct, but they don't entirely satisfy those who look at the precision achieved and wonder whether additional technologies might have been employed, knowledge that was later lost or deliberately suppressed. The mystery doesn't need to be solved tonight. Let it remain mysterious. Let the questions hang unanswered in your drowsy mind. Mystery is restful. It relieves you of the burden of knowing, the pressure to understand. You can simply accept that ancient peoples built remarkable things through whatever means and rest comfortably with the unknown. The Anunnaki period produced innovations that persisted into historical times and beyond. The wheel, one of humanity's most important inventions, appears in Mesopotamia around 3500 BCE. The plough transformed agriculture, allowing more efficient cultivation and supporting larger populations. Bronze metallurgy enabled better tools and weapons. Writing systems emerged, first pictographic, then evolving into cuneiform script capable of recording complex ideas and narratives. Mathematics developed to handle the accounting needs of temple complexes and trade networks. The Sumerians used a sexagesimal number system base 60, which we still employ for measuring time and angles. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. All these derive from Sumerian mathematics. Why base 60 rather than base 10, which our fingers suggest? Some propose that base 60 was taught by the Anunnaki, who used it on their homeworld. Others note that 60 has many factors, making it convenient for division and fractions. Astronomy flourished in ancient Mesopotamia. The Babylonians could predict lunar eclipses. They tracked the planets and understood their movements well enough to identify what we now call retrograde motion. They divided the sky into 12 zodiacal constellations. They recognized the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts which constellation the sun rises in on the spring equinox, moving through the complete cycle in about 26,000 years. This astronomical knowledge seems remarkably sophisticated for ancient peoples, working without telescopes or sophisticated instruments. How did they achieve such understanding? Patient observation over many generations, certainly, but some suggest they were taught by the Anunnaki, who needed to track Nibiru's orbit and understand celestial mechanics for practical reasons. Again, certainty is impossible. The ancient records are fragmentary. Interpretation is subjective. Multiple explanations remain plausible. And for you, drifting in the borderlands of consciousness, it matters not at all. The stars wheel overhead regardless of whether anyone understands their movements. The universe operates according to its laws, whether those laws are known or unknown, and you can rest peacefully in the midst of cosmic mysteries that dwarf human comprehension. The Anunnaki created humanity, according to the myths, but they did not create perfect beings. We were fashioned as workers, given enough intelligence to follow instructions but not enough to threaten our creators. We were mortal, while they lived for thousands of years. We were weak, while they possessed godlike strength. We were ignorant, while they possessed cosmic knowledge. But Enki, compassionate Enki who loved his creation, perhaps more than he should have, gave humanity additional gifts. He taught us agriculture, showing how to plant and harvest rather than simply gathering wild foods. He taught us animal husbandry, showing how to domesticate sheep and cattle rather than only hunting wild game. He taught us building techniques, showing how to make bricks and construct permanent dwellings rather than living in temporary shelters. Most importantly, he gave us the capacity for wisdom. In the Mesopotamian version of the Eden story found in the myth of Adapa, Enki creates a perfect human, wise and capable, but Anu, king of the gods, refuses to give Adapa the plant of immortality, ensuring that humanity remains mortal, even if they become wise. Knowledge without immortality, wisdom within the bounds of death, this is the human condition according to Anunnaki mythology. The parallels to Eden are striking. In Genesis, humans gain knowledge but lose immortality, expelled from the garden before they can eat from the tree of life. The serpent in Eden, who brings knowledge, is traditionally interpreted as evil, the tempter who causes the fall. But some Gnostic texts identify the serpent with Christ, the bringer of liberating gnosis. and some students of Anunnaki mythology identify the serpent with Enki, the god who elevated humanity despite opposition from Enlil. These mythic patterns spiral through history, each culture adapting them, each generation finding new meanings. The core remains constant, humanity poised between bestial ignorance and divine knowledge, mortal yet conscious of mortality, limited yet aware of our limitations, capable of wisdom yet prone to folly. And you, dear listener, you embody this paradox. You are a biological organism, following genetic programming, subject to physical laws, destined to die. Yet you are also a conscious being, capable of contemplating your own existence, of finding meaning and beauty, of loving and hoping and striving toward goals that transcend mere survival. Tonight, though, you need not contemplate these mysteries. Tonight you are simply tired, simply ready for rest, simply surrendering to the natural rhythm that demands periodic unconsciousness. Philosophy can wait, theology can wait, mythology can wait, sleep cannot wait, sleep demands its due, and so, let consciousness finally, fully, completely fade. Let the last vestiges of awareness dissolve into darkness. Let the Anunnaki and all their wars and all their wisdom and all their mysteries become nothing more than a distant dream, fading as all dreams fade when morning comes. But morning is far away yet. First comes the night, the deep night, the healing night. First comes sleep, blessed sleep, necessary sleep. The wars are over, the battles are won or lost or abandoned. The gods have departed or died or transformed into metaphor. And you are here, in this moment, ready for rest. Sleep now, finally, completely, deeply. Let go of everything, let the ancient world dissolve. Let the story end, let consciousness cease. Only darkness, only silence, only rest. Sleep.